Ever since becoming the head coach of the Detroit Lions, Dan Campbell has been known for his absolutely infectious personality and his amazing sound bites. But the one message that is coming through loud and clear is the one that his team is playing with on the field. We're going to talk about it in today's episode, folks, so stay tuned. It started with an owner who had a last name fans despised, hiring a coach that the experts thought was crazy.
But I got a plan, I swear to you.
Who traded for a QB that was said to be washed up. They said the Detroit Lions would never amount to anything, that it would always be the same old Lions. But this team, our team, has a new identity, defined and expressed by the crazy head coach.
Doesn't matter if you have one ass cheek and three toes, I will beat your ass.
Led by the QB that nobody thought was good. Motor City Mania is in full swing and ready to start. So join the show and be prepared for kneecap biting, because Motor City Mania starts right now. Hello everyone, and welcome back to yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. I'm your host David T. Pike, and we're diving in right now. As always, to those that are coming back to the show, I just want to say thank you all for coming back. Thank you all for your view, your support, your patronage. Thank you all for everything that you do. And for those that are coming into the first time for my show, I just want to say thank you all for giving my show a shot. Hopefully you guys enjoy the content. Hopefully I gain your subscription. And with that, I just want to say to everybody, God bless. Hope you enjoy the show, and let's dive in. So here's what we're going to talk about today, folks. When you think about how the Lions have kind of transformed themselves over the last couple of years, it's been rather intriguing how this team has kind of, transformed itself, has kind of grown, has gone from where it started when Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes first took over to where they are currently right now. And the reason I'm talking about this is because the best way I can think about this is if you take a look back to that game we just had against the Chicago Bears, this whole process of being able to grow, transform, build upon, you can kind of sum it up into what happened with that Chicago Bears game. And that Chicago Bears game is also kind of a microcosm, kind of like a case study, if you will, of how the Lions, the city of Detroit, and the fans have kind of had to go through this process of getting to where they are right now. So for me, not only was the game against the Bears a game where the Lions pretty much sent a very, very clear message to the NFL, but to me it also is kind of like an embodiment, if you will, of how this team has gotten to where it is right now under the leadership of Dan Campbell, Brad Holmes, Sheila, and all the other people, and also under the leadership of players like, Jared Goff, Penei Sewell, and all these other really great players that we have. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Kind of like an all-encompassing episode, if you will. Kind of like, okay, this is where we started, to this is where we are right now, and kind of tying that all together in with the current game that we just played against the Bears. So, without further ado, let's get into it. So, let's first and foremost understand something here. The Detroit Lions. If you've been a Lions fan for virtually any period of time, you would pretty much know that the Lions are a team that it seems has always been, for the most part, been cursed and have not really been able to find success. Unless you were back when they were still playing in the 1950s and you're actually able to remember that, the Lions have virtually known very little success ever since then. We've had one playoff victory since 1991, and that was that time. 1991 was the last time we had a playoff victory, and it's just been so sparse, the amount of success that the Lions have had as a professional football organization. And you have to think about how that has come into being, because think about it. This is a team, this is an organization, I should say, that has found ways to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory, because we always seem to find, or at least in the old days, about a couple of years ago, it always seemed that we were finding the most ridiculous way to lose games. Whether it was because of the refs, whether it was because of our own incompetence, whether it was because of bad coaching, it didn't seem to matter. We always found ways to lose games where it was like we should have had a chance to win that game. And again, that just kind of further exacerbates the whole thought process of, the rest of the NFL taking a look at us. Because for a long, long time, the Lions were nothing but the butt end, if you will, of just countless jokes about how we could never win. We were always losing. We'd never been to a Super Bowl. We were never going to know what a Super Bowl was. I mean, it's all just compounding itself one on top of the other. It's a domino theory here. And you have to think about it here. That's very painful for a team in the Detroit Lions that has not known a whole lot of success. But if you think about it, at one time, the Detroit Lions actually dominated the NFL in the 1950s, but yet for the better part of the last 20-something years, at least since the end of the Barry Sanders era, we've been doing nothing but getting dominated. And if you think about it here, this kind of starts this whole process of understanding how the city of Detroit, the Detroit Lions, and how these fans, the Lions fans, myself included, have kind of had to go through this just absolute chaos of hell that we've been through trying to get to where we are right now. Because think about it, folks. When the Lions had that resurgence that they had of being a national brand, if you will, with the likes of Barry Sanders, Herman Moore, Lomas Brown, Robert Porcher, and all those other really great players that we had in the 90s, that completely fell apart in the 2000s and for most of the 2010s. And if you think about it, this was a team during those periods that very much mirrored what was going on inside of the actual city of Detroit. And pretty much the city of Detroit that actually bears the Lions' name pretty much actually, is a pretty good mirror image, if you will, of how these teams, how the team and the city kind of go together is what I'm getting at here. Because think about it here, folks. Actually think with me. Not only, like I said earlier, the Lions used to be a team that dominated the NFL in the 1950s because we had 3 NFL championships. Think about this. The city of Detroit was one of the most prosperous cities at one point in the United States, and the reason why was because of the automotive industry. I mean, it's just simple history. If you go back to the 50s and 60s, pardon me, the factory jobs that we had due to the automotive industry pretty much raised the standard of living in Detroit. Detroit was one of the best cities to live in back in those days. However, that golden era that we now know of both the Lions and the city of Detroit has been long gone. I mean, now when you ever turn on the news about the city of Detroit, there's usually nothing but bad things, whether it's about murder or other things, and it's like, listen, that has been a negative stymie that has been surrounding the city of Detroit, much like how the Lions have had a negative stymie about the fact they've been nothing but an incompetent franchise, they've done nothing but losing, they've never got even close to a Super Bowl except once. So again, when you think about all that and you put it all together with the freaking automotive collapse that almost happened, the recession, how the city of Detroit fell on hard times, the fact that the Lions have not had a whole lot of success, they have fallen on hard times over the last 20 years with no hope in sight, you start to get a really good picture about how both the team and the city of Detroit have kind of come together, both in their terms of success and in their terms of failure, or when they have not been successful. If failure is a little too harsh of a word. But if you think about it, from those dark times, from those period of the last 2 decades where we've had maybe a couple of moments of bright spots, bright moments that have been mixed in almost in a total period of darkness. And what am I talking about? I'm talking about the 3 times we went to the playoffs, which was in 2011, 2014, and 2016. That's pretty much the best that we had from that period of 20 years where virtually nothing was going right for the Lions. We were constantly finishing either in the 3rd spot or the bottom of the freaking NFC North Division. We were always seeming to draft near the top end of the draft. It was just a really dark time to be a Detroit Lions fan, pardon me. But now, as we kind of turn the page from that dark history period, from that period of history where nobody wants to go back to, but it's like, listen, as a history major, I always refer back to history because I believe this to my core bone. If you do not learn from your history, you are prone to repeat it. So I'm not just going to throw it away and just say, hey, it never happened. I refer to it. I fondly refer to it because it's like, listen, if I don't, I'm more than likely going to repeat it. So it's like, listen, don't forget about the bad times because that's going to fuel you to keep the good times rolling. But getting back to what I was trying to say here, now after 2 decades of pretty much being irrelevant in the NFL, being nothing but bottom feeders, losers, whatever term you'd like to use, especially from what the NFL called us, now a corner has been turned. Now you can start to see what this team has been able to do over the last couple of years. And to me, that is in part and parcel to four main individuals. And that's Sheila, that's Dan Campbell, Brad Holmes, and Jared Goff. And you have to realistically think about how each one of those four had a huge part to play and continue to play, and how this team has I wouldn't even call it having a resurgence, kind of just like rebuilding itself, rebranding itself, giving itself a new identity. Because again, this is not the same old Lions. This is a completely different Lions. But think about it this way, folks. It all starts at the very, very top, and we have to go to Sheila for that, because you have to think about it. When Sheila took over for her mother, Martha, she was stepping into a role, and at first, she wanted to kind of be like, okay, I'm not going to upset the waters too much, but she wasn't going to wait very long before she decided to make a move. And what I mean by that is she actually made an atypical move of the Ford ownership by firing both Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia mid-season. That does not normally happen for the Detroit Lions. Usually they would wait until the end of the year to fire their management, their coaches, whatever the case was. Sheila said, no, I've had enough. I'm not going to wait any longer. I'm going to start the search now. Which for me, absolutely brilliant move, because it meant, okay, the season we're pretty much already saying is done. We're not really going to win a whole lot more games. But now what we're going to do is we're going to start getting ready to build for the future. That to me was smart. Because then what happened is that Sheila started integrating herself with the new GM and head coaching search, sitting down with players like Chris Spielman, Barry Sanders, sitting in those meetings, not necessarily taking over the meetings, but saying, okay, I want to know what's going on, so that way I'm in full understanding of the situation here. Something that not necessarily Martha or her husband William did all that often when they were, in charge, and also when he was alive. Obviously, rest in peace to Mr. Clay Ford. But here's the thing. Another thing that Sheila did is she took a very serious interest in the team. She took a very serious investment in the team in terms of her time, in terms of her energy, and everything else. Like, she was very, very interested in making sure this team was successful, because she's competitive. She wants to win. Again, if you know anything about Sheila, she is a very competitive, she is a very independent woman. She is going to go after what she wants. And what she wants, more than anything else, is to see the Lions be successful. So it all starts with Sheila. But then after that, you have to go to the next guy in the link. Now, that could be either Dan Campbell or Brad Holmes, but for me, since Brad Holmes came before Dan Campbell, I'm going to go with Brad Holmes. Think about what Brad Holmes brings to the table. He brought an innovative and comprehensive plan to how to rebuild this team through all phases of the offseason program, whether it's through the draft, whether it's through free agency, and yes, I know some people don't like to talk about this with Brad Holmes, but also in terms of trades. Because I'm sorry, the biggest trade he pulled off was the very first one, and that was the granddaddy trade of them all, when he traded for Jared Goff and traded away Matthew Stafford and got all of those draft picks, which set up the draft strategy that we've had over the last couple of years. So without that trade, the rest of it's all for naught. But then you have to think about also the whole strategy that he's had. And this is kind of going to tie us into Dan Campbell. Brad Holmes having that open communication, that strong relationship with Dan Campbell to make sure that, okay, the makeup, the design, the roster being what it is exactly what Dan Campbell is looking for, and it fits the vision of what this roster needs to be for both Holmes and Campbell to be satisfied with it. So again, Holmes brings a lot of that managerial, that organizational talent to be able to work with what the coaches need, but also be able to manage the roster so that way it's sustainable. Now, moving off of Holmes and going into Campbell, I mean, what else can we possibly say about Dan Campbell? I mean, Dan Campbell is literally the engine that just drives this whole freaking, Detroit Lions new motto, this new identity, this new mindset, because that's exactly what he brought. He brought a new mindset, a new culture, a new attitude to this team. It was like, listen, forget what's happened in the past. That's the old Lions. We're building something new here. We are moving forward to have an identity where it's like, listen, don't care who you are, don't care what you have, don't care what we have. We are still going to come out, we are still going to try and kick your ass, we are still going to play competitive football, and we are going to try and win. That was the idea, that was the identity, the attitude, the culture that Dan Campbell was bringing. And that instilled identity of grit, of, listen, it's not over till it's over. We have a never say die attitude. That is something that prior to the 2000s, prior until now, was nowhere to be found in the 2000s or 2010. That was something that we have not seen in Detroit. And again, that charisma, that identity that he's bringing also is something that that no coach that had been with the Lions since pretty much Wayne Fontes was in charge had been able to bring. Didn't matter if it was Marty Morningweg, Steve Mariucci, Rod Marinelli, Jim Schwartz, Jim Caldwell, Matt Patricia. Didn't matter who it was. They couldn't bring a culture that was sustainable here in Detroit. Dan Campbell was able to do that right out the gate. And again, that to me is what Dan Campbell brings to the table. That ability to instill a culture that everyone has bought into hook, line, and sinker. And as we've heard many times from these players, they're willing to run through a wall for him. And then the final one we need to talk about is Jared Goff. I know some people are not as high on Jared Goff, but you have to think about it from this perspective here. Jared Goff was the leader that we needed at the time we needed him. Because again, take a look at what Jared Goff is. He's a leader with no quit. The guy is tough as freaking nails, tough as hickory. The guy does not go down. He does not get out. He does not feel, he doesn't let anything razzle or frazzle him. Like, he is totally 100% consistent as a freaking arrow. Does not let anything bother him. And again, you have to think about what also he brings to the table. He is a tireless worker. He never complains. He never points fingers. He never lets the media bother him. He doesn't let fans get under his skin. He just does his job, which is exactly what Dan Campbell has said multiple times. Just do your job. That's all we care about. Go out and do your job, and the rest will take care of itself. And that is exactly what freaking Jared Goff does. And that is his mentor role, his leadership role to the rest of the team. Like, listen, follow my lead, and I will lead us the rest of the way. And that's exactly what Jared Goff does. So it doesn't matter if it's Sheila, Brad, or Dan, or Jared. They're all doing their job, and they've all helped transform and re-identify what the Detroit Lions are. So again, this ability to transition the Lions from the same old Lions to, as some people like to call them, the brand new Lions, or I call them the new era Lions, doesn't matter. To do that in less than 3 years, absolutely spectacular, absolutely amazing, because that is a quick turnaround for the NFL. But then you have to think about this. Now we're going to start kind of getting into the gameplay here. For me, the Lions' transformation, you can take a look at a number of games that kind of show what's gone on over the last couple of years to kind of be like, okay, these are games that you could use as kind of like, stepping stones to where we've gotten to right now. But for me, there are 4 games that you absolutely have got to include when you're talking about how the Lions have shown this transformation, how they have shown that it does not matter who the hell you are, it doesn't matter what type of team or opponent you are, what your record is, what your reputation is, we are going to come out and we're going to play you. And there are 4 games that stand out to me right off the bat. The Week 13 game in 2021 where the Lions beat the Vikings at home. The Week 18 game where the Lions traveled to Lambeau on Sunday Night Football and beat the Packers in Lambeau, stymieing them from the playoffs. The Week 1 game this year when we traveled to freaking Arrowhead and we beat the Chiefs on Thursday Night Football for the season opener. And the Week 11 game we just had against the Chicago Bears where we came back and we beat the Bears in an improbable fashion. And I'm going to tell you why every one of those games is a true testament, is a true reason as to how this team has gotten to where it is and why they have constantly been sending the same message of, we don't give an F who you are, we're going to come out and we are going to stomp a mud hole in you. We are going to play competitive football. Because think about this here. I want y'all to see if you can notice a pattern here as I start going down the line here. All 4 of these games, like I said, mark turning points for the Detroit Lions under the new regime of Campbell and Holmes, Sheila, Jared, the whole thing. But think about this, folks. That first game I talked about, the Vikings game in Week 13 of 2021, that was the very first win of the Campbell era. That's a big win. That's a very big win because it's the very first one. Okay, very simple on that one. But then you go to the next game I talked about, the Packers game. When we traveled to Lambeau, the last game of the year, we had already been eliminated from the playoffs, but we were going in there so that way we made sure the Packers didn't go to the playoffs. We were trying to play villain. We were trying to play spoiler. But there's another big significance to that game. It was the end of the Packers' reign of the NFC North and their dominance over the Detroit Lions. Because that year, we swept the Packers. And we had won our last game against the Packers at the end of 2021. So at that point, we had won 3 games against the Packers in a row. And, oh, by the way, that was also Dan Campbell's first primetime victory of his entire regime. So again, another big accomplishment for this team. Big primetime game. You're trying to keep your rival out of the playoffs. You end that rival's dominance over you and their continuing reign over the NFC North. That's a pretty big game in my opinion. Then we talk about Week 1 this year against the Chiefs. Boy, when you beat the Super Bowl defending champs on their home turf, and it's the second primetime win of the freaking Dan Campbell era, that is a huge statement victory because, number one, it was a freaking season opening game, which the Lions had not had a season opening game yet up until that point, if I recall correctly. They not only win the game in opposing stadium, so they go to Arrowhead, one of the hardest places to play in for an opposing team, but they beat the Super Bowl defending champs. Yes, I know they didn't have Chris Jones. I know they didn't have a Travis Kelce, but the point of the matter is they still went in there. They still won. Win is a win is a win. I understand some people don't like that argument, but it's like, listen, all anybody's going to care about at the end of the day is, hey, did you win or did you lose? So again, the fact that the Lions were able to go into inhospitable territory and beat the Super Bowl defending champions week 1, Thursday Night Football, season opener, that shows again how much the narrative, how much the identity, the culture, the thought process of the Lions had truly changed. But this last game against the Bears, not really significant for an overall effect like these other games. But here's why it is important. Because think about this. This was a game, as I said in my previous episode yesterday, I'm going to put that link back up at the top. But if you take a look at that game, we had no business winning that game. We should have lost that game. And anybody that wants to argue with me, Lions fan or not, I'm going to tell you, we should have lost that game. We had 4 turnovers. We were outdone 2-1 in terms of time of possession. We should not have won that game. But yet somehow, some way, in an ugly victory, we found a way to win. And I'm sorry, that is just not something that normally happens. That is just something that does not normally occur for this team. And for me, the fact that we were not able to play our best football and still win, absolutely amazing. But that's not where all the patterns end. Because I want to show you something else here. All 4 of those games I just mentioned, they were all fourth quarter comebacks. So we all were down going into the fourth, and we found a way to win. That's pretty impressive. All of those games, like I said, were turning point games. But more importantly, there are games both on the home front and on the road. So it shows that we can win whether we're at home or not. But then on top of that, 2 of those games were primetime games. The Sunday Night Football game against the Packers in 2022 and the Thursday Night Football game against the Chiefs. So what you're seeing here is an overall comprehensive picture that shows that the Lions can win under any situation. They can win whether it's a primetime game or not. They can win whether it's at home or on the road. And they can win when they're down and find a way to come back and win. That's pretty damn impressive because that is the complete antithesis, that is the complete opposite of what the Lions used to be when they were SOL. So again, what does all this mean? What am I all trying to get at here with this? This game that we just had against the Bears, more so than any, but the whole package that I'm trying to put out here is this. This is a huge banner that Dan Campbell and the Lions have planted not only in Ford Field, but to the NFL at large. And here's the simple message. We don't give a F. We don't give an F who you are. We don't give a thunder who you are or what you do, what you have on your roster, who you have, what your reputation is, what your record is. We're here to kick ass and take names. We're here to win. And again, this last game against the Bears, where we were utterly down and out for the majority of the game, completely defies the SOL mindset, completely defies that narrative. And again, like I said, this was a game that we should have lost. But the fact that the Lions were able to pull it out shows me 2 main things. 1, the growth of the team, but 2, the maturity of the team. That despite the fact things are going completely opposite of what you want, you're able to figure out a way to find a victory. You're able to get that victory despite everything else falling down around you. That is crucial. That is important. And again, it shows how Dan Campbell, Brad Holmes, Sheila Jarrett have helped transform this team. So for me, what does this all tell me at the very end of it all? The Lions, they're on the prowl, and they're hunting the NFL, and they're coming. They are going to come and they are going to get their own. Whether or not that results in a Super Bowl this year, I don't know. But I'm telling you this right now. There has never been a better time to be a Lions fan for almost anybody that's alive right now. So I'm just going to say this right now. Better hold on to your hats. You better buckle your seatbelts because it's about to get fun here. But until we get to that next game, which is on Thanksgiving against the Packers, I just want to say thank you all for watching yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. If you like what you saw, by all means, I want to highly encourage y'all to watch the next episode that I got coming out at the end of this one. I also want to encourage y'all, please, to make sure you do one of these three things. Like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. If by chance you've subscribed in the past and forgot to do so at the time, or you just subscribed and now you had a chance to do so, I want to highly encourage y'all, please, to do one of these three things. Like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. If by chance you subscribed and you forgot to do so at the time, or you just subscribed and you've not had a chance to do so, again, want to highly encourage y'all, please subscribe, because it definitely helps out my channel, and I'm ever so appreciative for every single subscriber that I get. But I also want to encourage y'all, please, make sure after you do subscribe to the channel that you also hit that bell notification icon as well, so that way you guys never miss any more content that I push out. Again, subscription numbers are always going up, but we want to make sure you guys get back to the channel as soon as I push something out, so make sure you turn on that bell notification, so that way you guys never miss anything else that I push out as soon as it drops. And also to help with that, I want to encourage y'all, please share this content with your Lions friends and family members. Share it here on YouTube, share it on Twitter, share it on Facebook, share it anywhere and everywhere that you can. It helps me out, and again, I'm ever so appreciative and thankful for all the help that I can get from you guys. Share it everywhere you can, and share it with anybody that you can. And with that being said, I just want to again say thank you all for watching my content. Thank you all for everything that you guys do for me. You guys are absolutely awesome and amazing. And if I hadn't earned your subscription, and I just did, I just want to say thank you all for your trust. Thank you all for your subscription. And if I didn't earn your subscription, hopefully you come back and I'll get another chance to do so once more. But with that being said, I just want to say to everybody again, God bless. Thank you all for what you do. And until the next time we meet, I'll see you all in the next episode.